John and Tom were two old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time, but one day they met on the street and decided to have a few beers together and reminisce about the old days. The friends happily sat down at a table in the nearest pub and started chatting. John asked, "Oh, I married Elizabeth, do you remember her? How could I forget that she was the prettiest girl in college?" Because he cherished his friendship with Tom so much, he had to live with her choices. "Yes, she's still fine now, even though it's been a long time, and we have 2 children. I've had plenty of time to build my career, and now that I can spend enough time with my future family, I think I'll be looking for my soul mate, and I'm happy for you." Tom invited a friend to visit. He lived near a lake where he often went fishing, and he wanted to share his hobby with an old friend. "The fish there are good, but most of all I like the tranquility that I find when I am alone with nature." Tom shared his impression. "I will gladly accept your invitation even though I'm not a fisherman myself. I will gladly accept your invitation even though I'm not a fisherman myself, but I will keep you company as we haven't seen each other for a long time." Knocking on the door, Elizabeth immediately opened it for him. She and Tom were awaiting the arrival of an old friend. John was momentarily speechless at the sight of his former love. He was both happy to see her again and reminded of how much he loved her, and that she was with Tom and not him, but he managed to hold back his emotions and clenched his fists as he greeted her. Still, he held back his inner excitement and greeted her politely. "Good afternoon, Elizabeth, you look well, you haven't changed a bit." John stole glances at Elizabeth from time to time. Her figure had become even more attractive over the years. He even wanted to talk to Elizabeth in private and admit that he still loved her, but he saw how soulful she was with her husband and children and decided Tom had his own boat and they took it out on the lake to enjoy nature and the fresh air. Tom began to prepare his fishing rod, and when they pulled up under the willow trees on the opposite bank he began to fish. There were more fish here and it was good fishing, but the lake was big and there were some places that few people knew about. Tom helped his friend with his gear and they both sat down in small folding chairs and cast off their rods. Tom handed the rod to his friend and walked over to the boat. There was a cooler bag in the alcove with pre-packaged beer. Tom laughed at the idea of building a fire and they spent the whole day at the lake and didn't get home until late. Tom handed his wife the fish he had caught. She happily took it and took it to the kitchen. "I think I should go, JN, get ready to call it a night, but it's so late, stay with us, we'll make up a bed for you in the guest room." Tom suggested that they hadn't seen each other in a long time. He just didn't want to let his old friend go. "Yeah, John, stay, we'd love to," Elizabeth encouraged him. "Well, if you insist." John scratched to the back of his head. "I think I will. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Come on, let's sit down for a while longer and have a chat," Tom said, and John agreed, and they chatted in the living room for a while before going to their separate rooms. Tom and Elizabeth went upstairs to their rooms, and John took the room that had been prepared for him on the floor at the end of the corridor. Elizabeth couldn't sleep and went downstairs to get a drink of water. Not wanting to wake her guest, she left the light on as she could see where she was going. He crept quietly to the spot and armed himself with a statue on a nearby pedestal in case there were strangers in the house. Elizabeth replied, "You're awake, can I get you something to drink?" John placed the statue on the kitchen table and sat on a stool. He looked at Elizabeth. Her face looked even more beautiful in the moonlight. "I never stopped loving you, even though I accepted your choice." Tom was lucky. "Honestly, Tom, and I always wanted things to work out in your personal life." "No, I'm sorry to say that no. I tried but I couldn't get you out of my mind. I'll always remember that moment." "John, there's no need to dwell on the past. What's in the past is in the past. We were young, we were stupid, but we had a good time." She got up from the table, put her glass in the sink, and went to her room, leaving John sitting in the kitchen, remembering how he had tried to woo Elizabeth many years ago, during his senior year of high school, when he realized he was in love with her. John decided to try his chance. He invited her to his house under the guise of studying. They stayed late at his house. John suggested going to listen to some music after class. He asked the girl to dance. John agreed because he liked her a lot and wished her all the best. As time passed, John tried not to think about it anymore, but now his feelings came back. But it wasn't just love that came back now. He was tortured by remorse. Tom had always been his best friend. And remembering that night with Elizabeth made him feel like a traitor. The two friends also agreed to meet the following weekend. John went to his place and thought long and hard about confessing to his friend what he had done. He realized how this could end. The two men drove to the marina and left their car at their usual place nearby. "What's the matter with you, John? What's the matter with you today?" "Oh, nothing, maybe I'm a little tired," John lied. He didn't know if he should tell his friend about what happened years ago. This time he had promised to take his friend to some secluded spot with beautiful scenery along the way. John wasn't sure how to start the conversation or if it would be worth it. The banks were thickly wooded, the water's edge was overgrown with reeds, the mud gathered at the other end around a windpile tree that stuck out of the water. The area was usually deserted and the water was quiet. Tom thought such a place would be perfect for solitude and relaxation. John took out the whiskey he had brought with him and invited his friend to have a drink. They had a glass or two and exchanged views of nature. Then John plucked up the courage to speak frankly and said, "Tom, I'm sorry. What's the matter, my friend? Are you pale and feeling all right? I want to tell you something. I will understand if you decide to break off our friendship, because I feel guilty in front of you. You scared me, John. Tell me what happened." John poured himself a full glass of whiskey and took a big gulp. He hoped the drink would give him courage. "I want to confess something terrible to you. I did a terrible thing in my last year at university. We were young and stupid, and then John started and he told me what happened and how sorry he was. I can understand if you don't want to see me again, but Elizabeth was just tempted. She loves you and I don't want to ruin her life. I just want to open up my soul to you." Tom was dumbfounded by what he heard. He couldn't believe that what his friend was telling the truth. He too poured himself a full glass and drank it down. "But why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you come clean then?" Tom didn't understand. "I wanted to come clean, but I was afraid of destroying our friendship. It's been so hard to keep it to myself for so many years." Tom felt anger and resentment start to fill him, overriding all other emotions. He felt something inside him squeezing him. It was hard for him to restrain himself from starting to shout and argue with John. After all, they had been friends for a long time. They had supported each other and helped each other when they were younger, before they split up and went to different towns. But it was hard for him to stop himself from shouting and fighting with John when he realized that this friend had betrayed him with the girl he loved, and that he had been holding a grudge about it for years. His mind was in turmoil. "I'm so sorry," John continued to apologize, but his eyes were fixed on the bottom of the boat, not noticing that the oars were flying towards his sanctuary. Tom stood still staring at the motionless Jan, voices in his head whispering to him to do the cheating. Tom was driven by anger to pick up the motionless body and throw it into the water. For a few minutes he stood still and watched as the body sank into the water, bubbled a few times and then never came back up. Tom looked around again to make sure no one had actually seen him before starting the engine and swimming away from the scene. Tom angrily replied, "John told me everything, but what did he tell you?" "Tom, I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. I forgot, because I love you. I'm sorry. It was a mistake," but that was the only time Elizabeth cried. But Tom wouldn't listen to her. He pushed her away and she fell and her temple hit the corner of the table and her body fell to the floor and blood came out from under her head. "Oh no," Tom looked sorry. "I didn't mean to, but it's all your fault."